appreciate the opportunity to be out here with y'all. Trip and I and our family, we've been here for about 8 months. We moved here from Japan. So we're from Arizona. So coming back to Yuma was somewhat familiar, but as y'all know who have moved at all, it's somewhat tough to find community. And I don't know everybody here really well, but the fact that this is happening, so I think we really appreciate it. So the first thing I want to say is thank you for inviting Trip and I in to this, because this is something special, especially for you young men. I hope you appreciate that, and I know you do, because this doesn't happen a lot in a lot of places. And so, first of all, thank you for having us as part of Valor. It's really a good thing that y'all are doing. So, I wrote some stuff down. I was traveling this week on the East Coast. I'm just going to use this to make sure I don't forget anything, mostly, and because I'm going to quote a book that doesn't deserve to not be quoted correctly. I'll put it that way. I apologize, I have to get some cheat sheet here. First of all, how about somebody tell me first of all why a guy is standing in front of you this morning? Like, what am I doing up here? Why does Mr. Jim and everybody else have people come up here and talk to y'all? What do you think the point of it is? Anybody?
Sharing life experiences.
Yeah, sharing life experiences. That's a good thing. What's the point of that? Who cares?
You can benefit from that.
Yeah, so you can benefit from that, right? Okay, so website, right? Valor's got a website. They call this, not for anybody say it, is a gleaning. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't know what that word meant. I've heard a lot of words in 42 years, and I didn't know what gleaning meant, so I looked it up. It means when they're clearing fields, right? It's they just pick up the weed. They have to do it a little bit by a little bit. Pick up whatever they're harvesting slowly, right? And so, like you said, you're here to listen to, like, I'm just one guy, right, that has gone through life and kind of, hopefully not halfway through it, hopefully just short of halfway through it, but you know, getting closer to halfway. And if anything that I say today helps you on your path, then that's a good thing. And I think that's kind of my objective. But I think it's really important that each one of you hear this. If you don't hear anything else, is that my path is not your path. Your path is not your dad's path. It can't be, and it won't be. Okay. And so the chances of you, and Mr. Paxton pointed out, I'm a test pilot, right? The chances of any one of you being a test pilot is about the same chance as I don't know, you being an OT or a border patrol agent or a youth minister. Low, right? Probably not going to do exactly what I do or what your dad does. And so think about that. Like, why would you want to hear somebody that's doing something different? And the more that you listen to people talk about what they've done, men specifically, because you are a male, the more that you're going to hear things that remind you of things that you are going through, or that when you are going through them, you'll be like, oh, I remember this guy talked to me about this, and this is how he handled it, and I thought that was interesting, so maybe I'll approach this. And the key thing to realize is that a lot of people, a lot of young men don't have exposure. They don't get to listen to stories like this. And so when they go into these hard parts in their life, they don't really have anything to point to and say, hey, I remember that, because they never were sitting around a beautiful fire and a beautiful morning in Combat Town, okay? And so that's why I think it's important for you to recognize that, because the more stories you listen to, even though that's not exactly what you're doing or going to do, you'll make better decisions because you'll be able to hear what other people have done. So your objective, I believe, as a young man, is you are in a critical time in your life, and everybody keeps telling you this, is because you're trying to figure out who you're going to be, right? When you grow up, what you're supposed to be, and this is just one way you can, one source of information you can get to help you make better decisions. What's some other sources you can use? Yeah. Bingo, man. I'll I'll tell you what, and that's kind of the reason why I printed this out, because I don't want to misquote it. So yeah, the Bible's a good one. What's another one? Anybody? What's that?
God.
Yeah, God. Yeah, God, the Bible, men that you respect, and in books, history, right? Because guess what? There's been a lot of men that went through almost the exact same thing that you're going through right now, and all of the same feelings that you have on the inside. Literally millions of men have gone through what you're going through right now, and millions of men after you're gone will go through the same thing. Okay, and so it's important to know that you're not alone, but it's also important to know that there's a lot of information out there of how people have done it well and how people have not done it well, and it's really just for you to go find. And so with that, here is one story of one man who has tried to do what he was supposed to do and had varying levels of success doing that. Okay, and I think Tripp and I have talked about this a lot, because he's like my guy. He's like the point man in our fire team of young men and women in our house. It's hard to figure out, what am I supposed to be doing in this life, right? You'll hear people about careers. I'll tell you some of the things that I did. I remember very distinctly being your ages and looking at grown men and saying that were successful, because I was able to be exposed to successful men through mostly my dad and his friends, and saying, gosh, like, these guys are so successful, they think they've got it all figured out. I don't have anything figured out. How do I figure out what am I supposed to do as a man? And how am I going to get to wherever that is if I don't even know which way to go? And so my first Bible passage that I will point you to is Isaiah 30:21. It says, "Whether you turn to the right or to the left, your ears will hear a voice behind you saying, 'This is the way, walk in it.'" And that, I'll tell you, the first thing that I will tell you that I've learned is that if you listen hard enough, you can hear him telling you. And I think that's why we come out to a place like this, right? It's because if you don't say anything, there's no cell phones ringing, there's no iPads, there's no cars, there's no anything. So if you just quiet, one of the values of, if your dad takes you out to places like this and camping, is to get away from all that noise, because you can hear God way better when there's not so many other men around yipping, as we say in our house. How many of you are just maybe a little bit nervous trying to figure out about the whole prospect, the whole idea of trying to figure out what you're supposed to do with your life? Does that make you nervous? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I don't feel grown up, so it still makes me a little bit nervous. And you should know that nervousness is normal and good, okay? Because there should be some tension about, hey, I know that I'm supposed to do something important, I just don't know what that is. And I think you have to kind of figure out, why do you feel nervous about becoming something important or doing something that matters? And the reason why that you feel nervous is because you are around people, your parent, your dad, your mom, other men in your life who have done something very, very important and are contributing in the way that God wants them to in their life. And you see that. And it makes you nervous because you feel that now it is your responsibility to do something like that. Okay? So I will tell you that it's a good thing that you have those people in your life. All right? And so that nervousness only is because of a blessing that you have men in your life that are living lives that matter. But it's also important you realize that you're nervous because they are close to you, these men, and you should also know that they themselves, the people that are making you nervous, they felt the same way and sometimes still do feel that nervousness about, hey, I need to go do something big with my life because God has given me a lot to do. So again, it's quiet here. We can hear God a little bit better. I'm going to tell you some of the things that I experienced in my life that drove me to be a test pilot when I was your age and then older, and how it happened. And again, it's not going to be exactly what you guys will hear, maybe what God will tell you, but you can start to see patterns. I think of Mark Twain, he said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? And so hopefully this story helps you. So test pilot, what does it do? What do they do? Mr. Jim kind of hit him on it. Basically, a test pilot, that's kind of one of the things I do. A test pilot is someone who the government buys an airplane, and they say it from a company. They say, hey, we want an airplane to fly this high and go this fast, for example. And the company says, okay, we built the airplane. Here it is. Here's your airplane. And then the government says, before we give you that money, we're going to figure out if it just can go that high and that fast. And so it's a test pilot's job to take that airplane and go figure out if it can go that high and that fast, for example. Also, can it drop the bomb? Can it hit the target? Can it land on the boat during the daytime, during the nighttime? All kinds of different things that we figure out to do. But can it go this high and can it go this fast? And so basically the test pilot takes an airplane out into a situation that it's never been before, and then brings that information back to figure out if it does exactly what it's supposed to do. It's about as simply as I can explain it. So thinking about that, we're going to kind of put that aside for a second, and we'll look around here. This kind of scenario that we're looking at right now, who knows what this is kind of supposed to represent that we're sitting here in Combat Town?
Like maybe the Muslims or something?
Yeah, kind of the Muslims. Yeah, what else, Trip?
Iraq?
Iraq, yeah, actually probably pretty close. Anybody else? Yeah, so Iraq, Muslims, it says the embassy right there. If you look at this place, I was in Afghanistan, right, on the ground with the infantry. This looks pretty similar to a lot of the places that human beings live over there still today, right? So if you are a young man in Iraq or Afghanistan or Pakistan or any of these places, this would be considered a compound, and most normally described by an area that has a wall around it. Why does it have a wall around it? You may know why is there a wall? Protect yourself, right? From bad stuff that's out there. Yeah? There's danger out there. Who heard the coyotes this morning? Anybody hear the coyotes? I heard the coyotes. Coyotes won't get you. But they found something and killed it at 5:30 this morning, and they were hooting and hollering like they do. We've heard it. You guys have heard it if you've been outside, okay? So there's things out there that we don't know about that are uncertain, right? And the idea is that inside of these walls, men and women have control over what's here, and inside of here is safe, okay? Who's heard of the term safe harbor? You guys ever heard of that? Yeah, safe harbor. Okay, so like boats, right? You know why they have boats in a harbor and there's like a little wall, like what is it called, a break there, and the boats come in and the water is very calm inside of the harbor, right? So they can park them, and when the storms come, there's not huge waves because the wall is outside the harbor. Keep the boats safe. This is kind of like a harbor for men and women, and they have walls typically because it's a dangerous place. It's not like 32nd Street or the big curve or the foothills where everybody just has, you can see everybody else. They don't want to see everybody else because there's danger out there, okay? So inside these walls is relative safety, okay? But what if we were never allowed to go outside these walls? We only had the food that we brought in right here, and you couldn't leave the wall for anything, not to go to the bathroom or anything. What would happen?
Starving.
You would starve. Yeah, what else? Basically, like, we would have to poo in the corner, right, or something. It would just kind of get gross, right, and then it would not be good, right? And so this is a safe harbor, but what you realize is that as a man, you can't stay in the safe harbor, okay? That's the first thing. And also, nothing enriching, nothing good that's going to make you a better person happens really inside of the safe harbor. Now, as a young boy, and younger boys, not young men like you, but boys, they grow up in our homes, right? And intentionally, you see a place like this in Iraq or Afghanistan, there's a lot of little kids running around. Yeah, because they're safe here because they can't defend themselves, and that's as it should be, right? Because boys And babies, because of the way we develop as humans, are defenseless, and so they have to stay inside the safe harbor. And that's good, but you are now at the age where you can start to protect yourself and you can start to do things. And why am I talking about harbors, the test pilots, things like that? I had to explain this very succinctly, not like I'm doing right now, about a year ago, and this is kind of how I described it. What a test pilot does, and what you guys are going to have to do a lot in your life, is you are going to recognize that nothing that you want to accomplish in your life happens inside of the safe harbor. Nothing happens inside of these walls, and nothing happens in this compound. You are going to have to go out there where it's dangerous to acquire and find the things of value, and then bring them back to your tribe to increase the value and the quality of life for your family, for your friends, and for your team. Okay? And so how do you do that safely? Because sometimes you go out there and you'll see people that'll go out there into the danger and into the unknown, and they don't come back. All right? And it happens. And you can make that parallel however you want. And so from a test pilot's perspective, I've learned a lot about life being a test pilot, because a test pilot is heavily trained. So Mr. Sniper talked about it. I went to the Naval Academy, aerospace engineering, which is not easy, a lot of math, a lot of math, right? But then you go and you're a pilot in the fleet, and then you become a test pilot, then you go to more school. It's a whole year. It's the longest school in the military, okay? And there's 6 months of training. You have to fly all kinds of new airplanes. I had to learn how to fly helicopters, and I'm a jet pilot, so that was really hard, because helicopters are harder to fly than jets. And then go to a whole school year where it's just the hardest year of schooling that I've ever been through. Half of it's flying, half of it's math and tests and engineering classes and all this crazy stuff. And what they're teaching you basically is to come up with a good plan. Go out there and then bring that information back in a very, very deliberate way, okay? And so the thing about being a test pilot you learn is to plan. And so in an airplane, when you go out and you go, hey, I'm gonna go faster than this airplane's ever gone before. Anybody's ever flown it. Sounds awesome, right? We're not really sure if the airplane's wings aren't gonna rip off, or the thing's gonna start tumbling, and it's not gonna go well for you as the pilot doing, 900 miles an hour, and the airplane starts tumbling. Who's ever seen the movie The Right Stuff? Y'all ever seen that movie about test pilots? No? Yeah, like back in the day, test pilots used to die all the time because they didn't really understand what was going on. It was very dangerous, and it still kind of is, right? Read the book, yeah, it's a good book. But what they teach us, and I think is important to you, is that when you go out there, you need to have a plan, okay? And the plan needs to be based on reality. It needs to be based on your understanding of what's potentially going to happen, and then you need to what if the heck out of it. What do I mean by that? Well, once you come up with a plan, then you have to say, well, what if this happens? What if this happens? What if this happens? Anybody have any involvement in their dad getting your guys' stuff ready to come out here this weekend? Anybody? Yeah, right? So you kind of already see that, right? You know, hey, your dad's like, well, we're going to need to sleep, so we need a sleeping bag. Probably need some water. Let's ask Mr. Jim, hey, is there anything else we need to bring for the group? So that we have fire and food and all this stuff. A lot of planning went just to come in to this, right? A lot of planning went into that. And so knowing that you're going to have to go out there in life where it's not safe and you don't really know what's going to happen, you need to make a plan to be successful, and so that you can come back, okay? And then the second thing that I learned is that once you go out there, nothing ever goes according to plan, ever. And the chances of it not going according to plan basically increase with how dangerous the situation is. And I've been in some dangerous situations as a test pilot, as a Marine. And so what you realize when you're out in a situation like that, outside of the safe harbor, going out to get that thing that is valuable, is that you need to have the ability to respond to things as they come. And it's not because you guys see movies, watch TV shows, whatever, hear people tell stories that are mostly not true about awesome things they did in dangerous situations, or in a sports game, right? Down to the wire, guys hit a three-pointer to win the game, or last second touchdown play, Hail Mary, catches it in the end zone. The reason why they were successful, in my opinion, is not because they're just a good athlete, or they were really smart, or they're a really good pilot, or they're a fantastic infantryman or a Navy SEAL, or they're an amazing firefighter, or whatever the story is. Why do you think that I think that they were successful based on what I just said? I know you know. You're not allowed to say. Why were they successful? Luck? They prepared, right? And so the more time you spend thinking about what could possibly happen out there, all of the things that could happen, the chances of what you think is going to happen that actually happen are very low. But if you've thought about things that are almost like that before, and you've thought, okay, if this happens, how am I going to know it's happening? What am I going to do about it? Who am I going to say? And then what are the possible outcomes of that action? The more chances you are to survive, for example, as a test pilot, to hit that three-point shot to win the game, to throw that touchdown pass, to find that kid who's stuck in the house when the house is burning down, to locate the people that are starving trying to come across the ridge line to get into the country, to find that family that needs you the most when you're trying to figure out how to help your flock as a minister. The more you prepare when you are actually out in the field, the higher chances you are of success. And I've seen it so many times because people are like, oh, you did this, you did that, you were recognized for that. I was brought onto teams that were very, very well prepared to go into very, very dangerous and uncertain situations, and it did not go the way that we thought it was going to go. But we had thought about situations that could have happened that were very similar to the ones that did happen, so that when it did happen, I wasn't nervous, I didn't freeze up, not because they call it nerves of steel. Who's ever heard that phrase? Ice running through your veins, right? You guys ever heard of that phrase? Like, you don't get nervous, you don't get flustered. I'm here to tell you that that person doesn't really exist. Maybe they do, I don't know. I'm not that person. But I can tell you that I've been in some situations where other people froze up and I didn't. And it's not because I've got nerves of steel or I've got ice running through my veins. It's because I spent a lot of time thinking about situations that were similar to that so that I could really quickly get a hold of it. There are 3 times I think that I've let go of the control stick of the jet and grabbed the ejection handle as a test pilot, waiting for the moment that it was time to pull it. The first one, we were doing night carrier landings aboard the USS Essex. So aircraft carrier, F-35, trying to roll out all the things, heavy sea state. So what I mean heavy sea state 6, sea state 8, we're talking about 30-foot seas south off of the coast of Alaska, to the point where the aircraft carrier is going down waves the size of city blocks, and when the ship goes down the backside of it, you can see the actual screws coming out of the water and turning, and you're kind of chasing this thing down the backside of the swell to land on it at night with no moon. And so you're like, gosh, that sounds awesome and scary and terrifying, and it was all those things, but we were so well prepared for that, I wasn't even thinking about it, to be honest with you, because if I did think about it, I'd probably get scared and freeze up. But I knew that it was coming, and we had spent 6 to 8 months getting ready for that scenario, and so I was very focused on the things that I knew that were important, and not worried about the things that weren't important, because I had a great team of engineers talking me through it, and we made it happen. But there were still things that didn't happen. For example, if you know anything about jet engines, they like a day like today, because when it's colder, the air is thicker, yeah? So there's more air molecules. If I take this amount of the air, there's more air molecules in this little mass of air, or volume of air, than there is on a hot day. And so the engine can eat more of it and produce more thrust, right? And so cold air, better for engines generally, and hot air worse in terms of how much push you're getting out of the back, or thrust. Well, what makes the air hot? This fire makes the air hot. Also, the exhaust of ships makes the air hot. And so if you fly through the exhaust of a ship, you can imagine an aircraft carrier makes a lot of hot air. And so if you fly through that, the engine eats up that air as it's trying to slow down and land. You can lose a lot of thrust. And if you know about the F-35B, it basically takes the air around it and pushes it down. And that's how it makes it hover. So I was chasing this ship through the night, through these swells, and and I flew right through the exhaust of the ship. And so the first thing you hear is the engine spools up to 100%, it goes like that, and you just feel like an elevator when it goes down really fast, like that, right? And so I was falling towards the ocean, and it's very, very cold on the ocean south of Alaska, because that's where we had to go to get those big waves. And so, you know, and I'm falling and falling and falling, and you think you'd be scared, but there was an engineer that remembered the data from this that happened a little bit before, and he said, and he wrote this thing. So we do a test hazard analysis, and he said, Champ, he's like, there's a chance that you could fly through the exhaust of the ship, and that and then this could happen, and this is what it's going to sound like. Here's what it's going to feel like. Here's what you'll know that you can recover from this successfully and not have to eject. And if you see these exact parameters, you know that that you're not going to make it. And you're going to have to go swimming. Which is interesting. And at the time, you're reading this paper and you're listening to this guy and you're looking at the data and you're like, okay, yeah, I see how that could be bad, and I appreciate you telling me this. Not ever really thinking that it could happen to you, but it did. And so the jet is falling towards the ocean in the middle of the night. The engine is screaming, trying to claw at the air because it's too hot. It can't generate enough thrust. And all I remember is thinking about this guy, Andrew Wardle, who's a British guy, and looking at the instruments on at the jet, and knowing that if I had this sink rate at this height, and the airplane didn't recover by then, you know, it was time to get out. So I let go of the stick. You hear that song, Jesus Take the Wheel. I was like, Jesus Take the Stick. I'm gonna hold on to this one for a second. And it was about 20 feet above the point where he's like cut it off, the engine recovered. And so the engine recovered. It's probably about 7 or 8 feet above the water. Come back, get it back above the flight deck on the carrier, and then recover the aircraft. And you know, the engineers are all shaking, you know, in the control room, and they're like, "Oh my God, Champ, like nerves of steel, right?" It's like, no, man, it was Andrew who prepared me for that, and so I didn't freeze up. I wasn't freaking out. And I was able to come out of that safely. And to an outside person who didn't know about any of those boring meetings on PowerPoint on a Tuesday in Pax River, we're just going through slides or watching stupid stuff on the brief, they'd be like, how do you not lose your mind and make the wrong decisions? And it's all preparation, guys. And so the information we pulled from that, because those jets, they get all of the data about how the engine responds and where I was relative to the airplane and where the exhaust of the ship is. We captured all of that information and then gave it to the fleet so that a fleet pilot doesn't have to think about that. He knows where to stay away from, knows where it's dangerous, and so that's what a test pilot essentially does in there. And so you go into a situation planning for the worst. When it happens, you know how to handle it, and then you capture that information